talking about smartphones, Kaye. Of course, it hit big out of the Wall Street Journal. This Apple and Google are collecting user data from the iPhones.
Location-based data, GPS coordinates, your location. And what was interesting, and there's a lot of technical stuff to this that I am not going to be able to talk about, but essentially, as I understand it, what it's doing is it is recording location. In some cases, we don't know everything about Apple yet, but they did find out with the Androids that they were actually collecting GPS coordinates and even with unique IDs, phone IDs, which actually brings it back to a very personal, granular level. And so Apple has yet to respond. But what happened is, do you remember the story about the fella? I think he went to prison for a while. He was a renowned hacker. I'm not going to remember his name. I'm sure everybody's familiar with him. He's sort of doing, I don't know if it's public service or whatever, but he's checking for security holes. He's checking for privacy fixes and all of these things. He apparently is the one that discovered this and documented it and apparently gave the exclusive to the Wall Street Journal. So he can prove what he's saying. And I find it interesting that Apple has yet to respond. And there is one senator, Representative Markey, has written Apple a couple of letters trying to find out more about this. And they have yet to respond. And this is another thing that's concerning. Because what happens is it's gathering this data. You don't know it. And every time you sync it, as I understand it, to your computer, it's collecting and putting that information in a file. So in other words, on a real person level, I suppose if you were a woman and you had a stalker and he got a hold of your computer or whatever, he could look into that file and see where you've been, when you were there, and all of these things. So you can see there's a lot of potential for abuse. Plus, it's a secretive thing. We know that those apps are collecting information on us. They don't give them to you for free. We know that, but they have not been forthcoming apparently about this. And if you remember back to when they changed the FISA law, and we found out in 2005 that the government was working with all of these providers. Quest was the only one that told them no, and they were just sharing all of this information. I actually saw Mark Klein. He's the engineer, I believe, in San Francisco that found that Norris beast in the secret room in AT&T. And I recognized him. I was up there when they were passing the FISA law in D.C., and I literally almost cried. But I saw him, and I thought, my gosh, he looks familiar. He looked so sad. I looked at him, and I thought, he looks like he's going to cry, too. And I realized later that it was Mark Klein that was up there, I believe. I know it was him. There's no mistaking him. Hadn't heard much from him recently, but Quest was the only company that declined for legal reasons. And I don't know how this played out, but the CEO of that company, I believe, ended up in prison. So there is a new era of cooperating with the government. I also have all of the documents on the security procedures with AT&T, Verizon, things like that. And it looks like a lot of times it's not on a warrant. I mean, they're sharing stuff pretty freely.
Exactly. And I think you were talking about Sammy Kamkar. Was that
yes, that's him.
That's the guy. And, I think I'm going to trust his information. Apple did not respond to this particular investigation. They actually did respond to one of Representative Markey's and Barton's, it was Joe Barton of Texas, and Markey's letter. And they did admit that they, quote, intermittently, unquote, collect location data, including GPS coordinates of many of the iPhone users. Google and, it's Google and Apple are building massive databases capable of pinpointing people's locations using their cell phones. And one thing, Kaye, this is just one of those things that shines a little light. And over the last several months, we have talked about the smartphone technology and, companies and government wanting to really tap into that technology. Collecting tolls is one thing.
Well, they look at us behaviorally and they can tell we're very attached to them.
Very attached to those.
Yes.
They are very useful if you are wanting to track someone and to get into their private lives. And quite frankly, that's exactly what this is. When you are collecting GPS coordinates different locations. Now, one of the companies, I think it was Apple, said that it just transmits data every 12 hours. Now, Google is, it regularly transmits. It's on a more regular basis than that. So when these smartphones are storing this data and either transmits it automatically or stores it and then transmits it as a bundle of information every 12 hours. That's pretty shocking to me that somebody or something somewhere knows each GPS pinpointed coordinate that perhaps I was at or somebody else was at in a 12-hour block of time, and then they can go over it again and over it again. And it doesn't take long, and especially with these are very high-tech companies, obviously, to figure out a person's pattern. And they can swear up and down that they're using it for marketing or whatever, but here's the deal. It can also be used for nefarious things. And if it can be, guess what? History tells us it will be. And
part of the thing is, too, when you take any one of these things in isolation, it doesn't seem like that big a deal. I had someone explain it to me. If you remember pointillism in art class, where you make the picture out of the dots. There's some famous French work. I can't remember the names of them. But it's pointillism. When you get really close, you see a bunch of dots. But as you get back, a very clear picture comes into view. And you think about your privacy like pointillism. Every dot. So we're talking about one dot right here. But when you take that dot and you add all the other dots, you end up with, I would call it your digital doppelganger. That's you without your soul and without your ability to defend yourself or explain or provide context. And that is exactly what is going on. That's the desired purpose. That's what they're doing. That's what fusion centers do.
It's the ultimate hunting device. I do a lot of hunting. And when you're able to follow tracks, you're able to finally find the critter that you're looking for.
Well, don't you wish the deer had a GPS device on beeping for you? Because you would have him, wouldn't you?
That's a good idea. I'll have to get close enough to one during the off season and planning with an Android or an iPhone, and then call Google or Apple up and say, hey, where is my trophy buck this year? They should be able to do that. They can do it with you or I right now.
When we come back, Paul Henry with Floridians Against Real ID. It's going to be a very interesting interview. Stay with us. You're listening to Axiom for Liberty on Rule of Law Radio Network. We'll be back.